Vietnam, a land of rivers, forests, and resilient people, became the stage for one of the most controversial wars of the 20th century. It was here that the United States, a self-proclaimed global guardian of democracy, waged a brutal and divisive conflict. But was it truly about democracy, or a tale of imperial ambition, grave misjudgments, and devastating consequences? This is not merely a story of battles and borders, but of the resilience of a people whose voices were often unheard. The story begins in the shadow of World War II as global power dynamics shifted. The United States, fearful of the spread of communism, adopted a policy of containment. Vietnam, seeking independence from colonial rule, became a pawn in this ideological war. To understand the Vietnam War, we must first step back. French colonial rule cast a long shadow over Vietnam for decades. The seeds of resistance were planted as the Vietnamese sought freedom and self-determination. The division of Vietnam, a communist North under Ho Chi Minh and a capitalist South supported by the United States, set the stage for one of the most divisive conflicts of the 20th century. What began as a civil conflict soon drew in global powers. When France faltered in 1954, the United States stepped in, driven not by the will of the Vietnamese people, but by the specter of communism. In 1964, the Gulf of Tonkin incident served as the catalyst for full-scale American involvement. Though later revealed to be exaggerated, it provided the Johnson administration with the pretext to escalate the war.
On August 7, 1964, the president signed the Gulf of Tonkin resolution in the East Room of the White House. It would be one of the great ironies of the whole war, the president receiving a blank check for a war he never really wanted, justified by an event that never happened.
What followed was a relentless bombing campaign, Operation Rolling Thunder, that devastated Vietnamese cities, villages, and infrastructure.
Increasingly now, Americans are functioning directly in the fight for freedom in this far, foreign corner of the earth.
The bombs did not discriminate. Civilians bore the brunt of the onslaught, with entire communities erased. Napalm and Agent Orange scorched the land, poisoning its people and leaving a legacy of enduring suffering. The chemical defoliants not only destroyed forests, but contaminated soil and water sources, leading to birth defects and long-term health issues for generations. Yet behind every bullet fired lay untold stories of resilience and sacrifice. Workers turned fighters, families torn apart, the line between victory and survival blurred. At the heart of Vietnam's resistance were the Viet Cong, a formidable force of guerrilla fighters. Operating in the dense jungles, they knew the terrain like the back of their hand. Their strategy was one of endurance, deception, and unconventional warfare. One of the darkest chapters of the war came in 1968, the My Lai massacre. American soldiers, frustrated and fearful, slaughtered over 500 unarmed Vietnamese civilians, including women, children, and the elderly. This atrocity was not an isolated incident, but a symptom of a dehumanizing war that erased the distinction between enemy combatants and innocent lives. Back home, the United States government portrayed the war as a noble fight against communism. But as the years dragged on, cracks appeared in this narrative. Leaked documents, such as the Pentagon Papers, exposed a web of lies, revealing that successive administrations had misled the public about the war's progress and purpose. The military employed aggressive tactics like search and destroy missions, often targeting villages suspected of harboring Viet Cong fighters. These operations displaced millions of civilians, creating a humanitarian crisis. Refugee camps swelled as families fled the violence, leaving behind a homeland ravaged by war. Back in the United States, the war's unpopularity grew. The draft disproportionately affected poor and minority communities, sparking outrage. Defiant young men burned draft cards as college campuses erupted in anti-war activism. The phrase, "Hell no, we won't go," echoed across the nation. In 1968, the Viet Cong launched the Tet Offensive, a coordinated series of attacks that shattered the illusion of American progress. Though militarily repelled, the offensive was a psychological victory for North Vietnam, eroding US morale and further turning public opinion against the war. The Vietnam War became a quagmire, claiming over 58,000 American lives and millions of Vietnamese, each a life irrevocably lost to the horrors of war. It fractured American society, sparking protests, civil unrest, and a crisis of conscience. Yet despite the overwhelming human and economic toll, the war achieved none of its stated goals. In 1975, Saigon fell and Vietnam was reunified under communist rule.
Tuesday, April 29th. The streets of Saigon, usually jammed with traffic at the morning rush hour, are quiet. Vietnamese not lucky enough to have been chosen for evacuation defied the curfew and stood outside the embassy gate, begging for a seat on the helicopters.
Vietnam was not an anomaly. It was part of a broader pattern of US interventions from Korea to Iraq, Afghanistan, and beyond. The justification was always the same: to promote freedom and democracy. Yet in reality, these wars often served strategic and economic interests, leaving destruction and instability in their wake. The Vietnam War serves as a grim reminder of the cost of unchecked power and misguided ideals. For the Vietnamese, the scars remain, both physical and emotional. For those who survived, the war lives on in memories, scars, and stories. The shadows of conflict fade, but they never truly disappear. They remain etched in the land, in the hearts of those who lived through it, and in the hope for a future without war.